need to hear more volume, more power here. How are you? All right. Um, fantastic. That's amazing. Hello, everyone. My name is Primi Jails, and I'm the project manager for Bali Fab Fest 2022 for the ground production processes here. So glad to be able to see you all here in Bali. Now it's day 9 of the event. And today we have the community panel on people's engagement in shaping their own future. And yeah, we have actually, I have to apologize first because we are running a little bit late. Yes. But here we are. We already have 4 amazing speakers in this panel, in the community panel. All of them are amazing, inspiring women, have been building communities in ways that are life-changing. And later on, they will introduce themselves and their project, what they're doing in more details. But please welcome Valencia, or should I address as Ellen, one of our panelists today, and Irene, or Ira. Yay. And then we have also Richa and Selena. Amazing. So we are going to hear from them, their views, their lessons learned, and some of their best practices in people engagement in shaping their own future. So without further ado, I would like to invite first speaker. It will be Ira.
Thank you. It's always helping me this day. So my name is Irene Agrifina. People usually call me Ira. So I come from Yogyakarta, from Hornf and XX Lab. I'm one of the founder. So today actually I present, I'm not sure if it is related. I hope it's related, and what I'm talking about will be related to the topic, shaping our own future. And so we have no ideas what is the future will be after the pandemic era. And actually, this morning I talked with my friend. Is actually just cross here, Gatot, about how actually we started Hornf, and then what we built 20 years ago, and how it's related to the event right now, and why I'm here today. So next. Yeah, in Indonesia, it's many art collectives and cultural initiatives, and then it's become a vital place for learning and then sharing, and then it's always mixed between arts, cultural, and then wider creative sectors. And yeah, mostly the name, 3 names that the famous one, of course, we all know Ruang Rupa, and then Mas 56 and Taring Padi, and then they started in 1998 after tumultuous event, revolution of Suharto regime, and then the young people actually gather and then mostly do nothing, and then we started do something, and mostly it started from the home. It's the living room, or just a little small room, or a garage. And then this is us 20 years ago. It's just small garage in the Jogja, but it's open for 24 hours. So when we started this, and many people come, it's scientists, designer, artists came, and then one time people came and said, so you have a hacker space? And we said, no, no, no. What do you mean? And we're not hackers. Yeah, you have a hacker space. This is a literally hacker space that we have no idea what is hacker. And then next. But then we just say ourselves, so we just one who gets excited for things that no one else cares about. And then is there a sound? Or I just can skip. So It's just 5 minute video, sir. 3 minutes. we divided ourselves into three because it's just too many people in one little garage. So we have three labs. One is for FOC, is special for extraterrestrial study center, so focusing in the our space science, and we have HonFab lab. Uh, and it's a funny story actually. When they come, they also call us. So you are a maker. Do you want to make a fab lab? And we like, what is actually a maker? Like we have no idea actually what is makers. Like we even didn't ever heard actually. And then but they say yeah, and then you can make almost everything. Oh wow! Oh, so let's make fab lab. And then we have Fab Lab Yogyakarta as the first fab lab in Southeast Asia at that time, and we have Hon Factory. So yeah, and then we say collective is as a catalyst for freedom, expression, and creative economy. So everything is actually started from the collective. And Yogyakarta is a small city in Indonesia, but the whole city is like collective. I just also discussed with Gaton, my friend, this morning actually. Yeah, there are many collectives in Jogja, but actually the whole city, like we always working together. If I have an event, if I have a lab, I want to make something, so the whole city actually always help each other, every collective. So that time we call it that Jogja is actually a big collective. It's like a big kampung. It's like a big village. And this is like the activities in our lab. So we have workshop from kindergarten and until our neighborhood. Next, and then this is some research that actually we do with some villagers around the lab. And then we also have a think tank project with universities and some schools, like locally, national, and internationally. And this is some project on works that we do. Yeah, this project is a bit funny project because in Indonesia at 2010, the government raised the tax of alcohol. So we always drink a very cheap red one. It's not even made from grapes. It's made from papaya called anggur merah. But that time the the government raised the tax of alcohol until from 15,000 it's become like 50,000, and no one can afford to buy anggur merah. And then there are so many people died actually in Indonesia, thousands, because they just mix everything to drink. And then we make this project. We come to one university and ask actually how to make a safe alcohol because everybody love to drink. And then come this project. Yeah, and they said like, hey, it's so easy actually. You can make from local fruits and come this project. But we are the biggest Muslim country in the world, so we cannot like really open this project. So we make this project into an installation which is make different sound from different local fruits, and we call it the bacteria orchestra. Next, and this is a project about micronation. Micronation is a sustainable design prototype for farming. So we work with farmers around Yogyakarta and around Central Java to make this project, and we make a blueprint and prototype that in 2000 now actually it was at 2013. Now actually we have a sustainable food and energy, but actually the government didn't really care about this project, so it was a bit abandoned. But some farmers still do this prototype. But yeah, and next. Next aja langsung. This project about the research about 4 river in Yogyakarta, which was polluted that time, and we make a okay. Next aja. And then this is a project that made by FUFOC and Indonesian Space Science Society. And then they actually chosen by NASA and Mars Society as the first artist and designer that follow the Mars research program in Utah and then in Japan. and it will be in Antarctica. Ini bisa di mana? So this project is actually body aware radio astronomy, and we are working also with one institution in Bandung, and now it's become a prototype, and every elementary school can make their own DIY radio astronomy and listening to the dark. And then we also gonna build this VMARS as a Mars analog research station in One Hill in Yogyakarta as a research-based project. And this is another project by Horn about the freedom of living things and 5 element of life. Yeah, this is the installation and the result. Yeah, so here we are. Horn is underground and arrogant as always and avant-garde, and we are breaking the system, and we do not want compliments on the wrong side. As an underground, we do not necessarily become overground. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Those are fantastic ones. So one thing I learned from Ira's presentation is actually that the community that was built actually come from people who has like similar interests. You're affiliated to each other because you have similar interest. And then, of course, you develop curiosity, right? There's similar views, similar values, some shared vision. And then suddenly you work together on something. You don't even predict things, and then things becomes big because of the togetherness that you have. So probably we'll discuss a little bit more on this one after, because we keep the question and answer and some more discussions at the very end. And so let's go and move on and learn from the second speaker. Second panelist is Richa from India.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Richa, and I run a makerspace in India called Makers Asylum. Sorry for the lack of energy because I've been sick for the last 2 days, so I've been trying to recover. But thank you. I'm really excited to be here and share the story. So this is our space in Goa, in India. It's in this 100-year-old beautiful Goan Porto house that we've converted into a makerspace now. We started back in 2013 out of a little garage in Mumbai, in Bandra, to create a space for people like ourselves to come together, share tools, share ideas, and make things. So in the last 9 years, we've moved 8 times because we got kicked out of 8 spaces. And we had to like move and recreate and do things again and again to, keep making. So this is like the first one that you see on the top is like this 200 square foot space. Eventually, we had this really large space in Mumbai, which was almost 10,000 square feet. So it kind of like grew very organically into this beautiful community of makers and people who loved making. And thanks to all the love of the community, we were able to kind of reconstruct and do things again and again. Um, but yeah, we started the space to create a space for people like ourselves to come together, share tools, share ideas, and just make things for the fun of it, right? And so yeah, these are some glimpses of our shops. You all know what a Fab Lab is, so. But a lot of artists, designers over the years have come to the space and done some really beautiful stuff. So all kinds of labs and all kinds of people have been using it. But when we started, a lot of, while it was like one of India's first open community spaces, so before this, I don't think so, there was like a space which was open for anyone to come and use. So it was one of the first community spaces in India. And interestingly, while it was a DIY space, a lot of people who came to the space were so excited to make but did not know how to use these tools. So just like any other makerspace in Fab Lab, we started designing a lot of workshops and programs that really propelled our mission of learning by making. And slowly, all of that started getting very bigger organically. So for example, this is one of our programs called the SDG School, where we work with a lot of youth around interdisciplinary exchange and working on the UN SDGs. So this has been happening now for almost 7-8 years, and it's been really interesting because now we've got like youth from almost about 30 countries in this program. So that's been really fun and exciting. So just to, get them to get together and share ideas and really work around their local communities. And the program now gets hosted in different parts of the world. We've done it in Paris, in Mumbai, and we're doing it in France again. So it's been really fun to really bring together a lot of interdisciplinary perspective to problems around the world. We also do something called the Innovation School, which is for teenagers to work on and learn about these skills, and we work with them and with the community to actually help them build these skills and also work on projects which they love, so that they can start like really taking ownership of things around them. So it's been really amazing. So there's all kinds of people have come, all kinds of participants. Now we have alumni in over 30 countries through our programs and workshops, and it's kind of also become this really amazing hub of innovation in India. So a lot of different kinds of projects have come out of it. That's our mobile fab lab over there called the Maker Auto. If you've seen a tuk-tuk, it's a tuk-tuk maker fab lab, basically, with gullwing doors like a Lamborghini. So it became really viral. We used to go and teach a lot of kids in government schools around making over there. And a lot of really fun stuff has come out of the space over the years, a lot of partners and stakeholders, and a lot of startups and social enterprises as well in the space of industrial robotics, prosthetics, drones. Almost over 30 startups have come out of the space very organically, which has been really amazing as well to really enable the community. So we kind of work at the intersection of education and open innovation. And that's what I think now we've progressed into, from being a makerspace to kind of like designing a lot of programs and interventions where people can learn about making from an interdisciplinary perspective. And innovation, because we also really enable a lot of open research and development with the community, for the community, and together we kind of create a lot of things. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this story in the pandemic, which was really, which I think is really exciting, because this community over here also did a lot of things, and we've seen a lot similar things happen in different parts of the world. But this was really one of the most surreal experiences of my life. So, so I wanted to share that with all of you as well. The story starts when India went into the first lockdown in March 2020. So just like everyone else, we had to shut down our space. and we had this massively large space in Mumbai where we were paying a massive amount of rent. So we had to shut that down. But instead of going back home, we decided to stay back at the asylum. So our team just decided to quarantine at the space because, you know, it would have been boring to go back home. And while we had our tools, we thought maybe we could do something useful and fun with it. And there was this massively grave situation that was arising in India around PPEs. And one of the things that was on the government's list, the number 3 on the government's list was face shields on the procurement list. So there were no face shields in the country at that time. And this is, mind you, the first week of the lockdown, which is crazy because there was nothing, like there was nobody out there. So what we started doing was we started designing and prototyping these face shields. We started this crowdfunding campaign to raise money to make 10,000 face shields. This was really a point of contention because my team was really upset with me to put this goal of 10,000 because they were like, that's impossible for us, like four people in this lab to make 10,000 face shields. So they were really upset, but they said, okay, maybe we could make 1,000 and maybe we can raise money for 1,000, but like 10,000 is just impossible. But nonetheless, we started raising this, raising money and started, doing this crowdfunding campaign. And slowly, a lot of volunteers from the maker community, because we've been doing this for almost 9 years now. So there was a whole lot of people who wanted to come and contribute. They started coming to our space, and we started making these face shields at our space. And we went through 21 design iterations in this process. So you started with the paper prototype at the bottom, you see, and we went through a lot of materials, and eventually we injection molded this particular face shield that we were able to make. But 21 design iterations for a product like a face shield, which was really crazy because we used to wear it like all through the day and actually, sit with it to know, what are the problems with this thing. And it was really interesting. And there was a massive choke supply chain. So we literally had police officers, ambulances, and people standing outside our lab to collect these face shields because we were the only ones who were making it at the time. So it was crazy. Like, it was just this bizarre post-apocalyptic kind of scenario, like where makers thrive, This is the time that we want to use our tools and make stuff. So it was kind of like very surreal. And we were in Mumbai. Mumbai is one of the densest, cities in the world. And it was so unreal to see there was no people on the road. We had to literally, the police gave us permission to work because they wanted the face shields. So that's the reason why we were able to do it at the time. But it was really fun. So this was one of the materials that we discovered at the time. This is called the foam board. These are marketing materials that are available in every part of the world, for billboards and, things like that. And this material is very interesting because it's non-porous. It does not absorb anything. And it's really interesting because it could be used inside a hospital, eventually. So this was one interesting point of our work at the time. And the other thing that we did, of course, was because we knew that we could not make so many by ourselves, we started open sourcing just like anything else. We open sourced our designs. We started sharing the videos of how to make it. And something really beautiful started happening. One of the things that we were doing at the time was we were collecting a lot of information from hospitals and people who wanted these face shields. So there was this open form that was going around, and it kind of went a little viral in India because a lot of press, a lot of social media, and all of that, I don't know, it just started happening. So we were getting a lot of these requests. So one of the things that we really integrated into this whole thing was how to make, if we were open sourcing these, how could other labs actually make it in a more self-sustainable way, right? Financially as well. Because to make it is one thing, but to also how do you make it in a self-sustainable fashion. So what we were actually doing was we were connecting, and interestingly, what we also found out in India was that there are a lot of laser cutting shops. They're not inside maker spaces, but they're like independent shops because they, again, do a lot of work with marketing materials and stuff like that. So every part of India actually has these. So we were starting to connect these laser cutting shops to makers, makers in the local communities and to funding bodies and to the local hospitals that they were, then kind of working with. So we were trying to create these local self-sustainable ecosystems so that they were able to, do it themselves and, also, sustain themselves in that manner. And then a lot of people started joining from different parts of the world, in the country. And eventually we had 42 cities, towns, and villages who were able to join. And we were able to actually go from 0 to 1 million face shields in 49 days. So which was really, which is really amazing, because it was pretty quick, and just like coronavirus was growing exponentially, the face shields were also getting there exponentially. And the most humbling part of all of this was while we were, somebody did this graph. So you can see the yellow line is Makers Asylum. We were consistently kind of making these, but like a lot of other people who joined the collective were able to do much more than us. So we were actually making and doing better with less, while we were not making ourselves. So it was a beautiful example of a collective, power of collective intelligence and how you can actually rapidly innovate and accelerate together. So yeah, these are some pictures of all the frontline workers and everyone wearing our face shields. And the group that was there was very interdisciplinary in nature. There were filmmakers, there were photographers, there were chefs, there were like the youngest member of the collective was a boy in Gujarat who made 300 face shields at home for his local doctors. So it was actually very beautiful that everyone was a maker, so we didn't have to be only the maker community. And it eventually became this case study. Cambridge wrote about it, a lot of things happened. But while all of this was happening, we were trying to raise funds, and a lot of the organizations that we were talking to did not really understand the whole idea of distributed manufacturing, everyone was funding centralized projects, and we were having this conversation, and very difficult to, get funding for open source projects because people really did not want to fund something like that, right? But anyway, we went on to make other products as well at the time. So we did baby face shields for babies, which we actually sold on Amazon as well. It became actually pretty crazy because a lot of these babies could not wear masks at the time. We did some superhero face shields for teenagers to adapt. We also made active respirators and oxygen concentrators and things like that as well. And then fast forwarding to the second wave, there was a massive oxygen problem in the country, in India specifically. And one of the things that we started doing was a lot of the open source oxygen concentrators were not very manufacturing ready at the time. So we started designing and developing our own open research around oxygen concentrators. And in 4 weeks, with the same collective, which now grew to almost many more people, we were able to make 30 prototypes across the country. This was the final oxygen concentrator that we made. It's called the M1902. A lot of other labs were also able to take that research and make it in their own local spaces as well, which was also amazing. And eventually, some of the organizations came on board to support us and understood, why open source and distributed manufacturing is so important and key. And this was actually a high flow oxygen concentrator, so 20 LPM with 95%, so which was a pretty good one that you could use in hospitals as well. And then again, in the second wave, what happened was a lot of in India, we were importing a lot of these oxygen concentrators from different parts of the world because, we did not have them obviously in the country and there was a need for it. But interestingly, what started happening was a lot of them started breaking down when they came to India because of temperature, because of, tropicalization issues and things like that. So we started working with the European Union to actually build capacity locally around repair and reuse of medical grade equipment and how we could actually train local communities. Very interestingly, in where I am in Goa, just like Bali, it's exactly similar. So there are a lot of scuba divers in Goa, people who dive. And they're really good with actually making oxygen concentrators because they literally work with oxygen concentrators. So they were actually able to help us make these and give so much insight. So what I mean to say with that point is that there's a lot of transferable skills in the community locally that you can use to, actually create more things. And one of the things with this particular repair was to, look at those transferable skills that we could use and create like communities that are more self-sustainable, self-reliant in terms of skills that they have. So the maker community again pitched in to build capacity. We were able to repair and actually skill a lot more people with this part of the initiative. And we were also able to create a decentralized open source repair ecosystem in India, this part. But yeah, so the crux of my presentation pretty much is that it's important to build local capacity and resilience. And I mean, in the last 20 years of the globe, the global maker movement has fueled like this different alternative mindset. And as the problems become more complex, fueling an alternative mindset can help communities solve hyper locally, because that's going to be the next way in which we're thinking about distributed manufacturing, open sourcing. It can create like locally resilient communities that can actually support themselves while we can be connected, and share ideas together. So yeah, that's, and this was a little bit of a snapshot I wanted to share. I'm sure you must have seen this report, but this is something that Open Source Medical Supplies did as a report in the first wave, which I wanted to point out, which is amazing, is that the open source community was able to actually deliver 271 million worth of, supplies in the first wave, which is actually a pretty large number. And just imagining if local communities, unorganized communities can do that, giving them some more skills and actually making them more resilient can do so much more in the future. So yeah, thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, that is beyond amazing. I think that's why the name is Aslam Makers. That's crazy. So I think what I personally learned, just to wrap up on all of that, what I personally learned from that is that when it comes to people engagement in building the community and shaping their own future from your story, Richa, it's such a beautiful story that there's strength in community. And when the community works, sometimes it's not even just like something that is just for themselves. What resulted from a work of a community is something that is impactful. And oftentimes, after the impact comes the legacy. So that was a very beautiful one. Thank you so much, Richa. And I think let's move on to the next panelist that we have for today. That will be, ready? Ellen.
So, good afternoon, beautiful people. How's our energy level from 1 to 5? 1, depleting very fast. Still resilient? Good, good. I hope so. I try not to take too much of your time. So my name is Valencia Huta Barat. You can call me Ellen. I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. And I'm not from any Fab Lab, or nor am I associated to any Fab Lab. Actually, I have some friends from Fab Lab. I'm not a maker, so I don't have any product to show. But what I have made during the whole week is a lot of friends. So thank you for being here. Today, I think I'm gonna bring you to the story, The Tales of Three Islands. I don't know, like you've been here for a week, I think. I don't know how much you actually know about Indonesia. Anybody? How much do you, well, not Thomas, it's not fair, but how much do you know about Indonesia? So let me just start with okay. So this is Indonesia. For those of you who don't know, we are a country of 17,000 islands, more than 17,000 islands, and 275 million people. So just a slight below India. We're not trying to compete. And so as you can see, this is an archipelago. But for a long time, what we've been taught, at least what I've been taught, I live here in Jakarta, so it's here, it's the capital city. For a long time, what I've been taught is an agrarial country. So, but actually, it's not an agrarial country. It should be a maritime country. So for a long time, the way we see Indonesia, it's always about, the farming, the landed people, instead of like people who are actually facing this these challenges of living on different islands. For some of us who lives in big cities, of course, we enjoy all the privilege of just, island hopping everywhere, especially in Jakarta, because it's very easy to get a flight to anywhere or get a train transportation or a car transportation. But for those friends who live like in these small islands over here, sometimes they can only leave their islands every 6 months, because once there is a very big wind coming from Australia, then the wave is going to be very big, and then they have no plane, so then they cannot go anywhere. So it's a very different reality, but for a long time we really never realized that, especially when you come from Jakarta. Okay, so before this one, I'm going to tell you a story from 3 different islands. So one is from Borneo. If you Google Sampit, so there is a city here called Sampit. And then there is a city here called Poso. And then, I think this is Sumba, yeah. And then this island, Sumba. So I have friends who are working there. I have projects that I work on that space. Let's try with this one. This is Sampit. So Sampit is in Borneo. What is special about Sampit is it used to be the second biggest wood producers in the world, after, I think, there is a Brownsville, like a wood milling in Brazil. So at that time, there's this Dutch company who runs a wood milling factory, both in Brazil and Indonesia. So we're more connected more than we know. So why they started at Sampit? Because from this sea, this is, we can see it here, but if you Google later, so there is like a river that is deep enough, and it is big enough and it is wide enough for big ships to bring like all these big woods coming from the forest. So there's a lot of deforestation for 20 years. So the richness from that area never really got to the people. So if you see Sampit now, you don't think that the area was very rich at one point. And here, this is Poso. So Poso is in the middle of the K island that we call Sulawesi. So both areas, what they share in common is not a very, it's not a very good experience, because we have suffering 2 conflicts in this area that caused like more than 500 people, 500 casualties in each area. So the one in Sampit, it's the ethnic conflict between 2 tribes, between Dayak and Madura. The one in Poso, it's a religious conflict between the Muslims and the Christians. So when we first invited to go to Sampit, we were actually invited to revitalize. They have a wood museum because they want to celebrate. It's very interesting because they want to celebrate the richness of the wood diversity, but actually what they're celebrating is the act of deforestation, the wood exploitation. So we were like really thinking hard, because we don't want it to be about wood. We don't want it to be a material. So what is it that, like, where do we enter this problem from? And then we thought like, okay, because what Sampit was really famous of is like actually the forest and the river. So we introduced the idea to the government, like maybe we can see the wood instead of just as wood as a material, but wood as part of the ecosystem, which is the forest and the river, which is within the ecosystem. There are people in Sampit who lives in it. But it's not that simple, because at the same time, even though the conflict has been 20 years old, if you Google, you can still easily find Sampit as a former conflict area. So we found out during our research there are like 5 generations, yeah. So the generation who were older at that time, who were like on their 50s and 70s, who were like the local leader, and then the generation who are like on their 30s and 40s, who are really directly involved in the conflict. And there are generations who are like teenagers who are witnessing the conflict, but necessarily get involved. And those who are still very, very young, who doesn't understand anything, and those who are born after that. So everyone has their own memory and their own response on how to deal with the conflict. But nevertheless, because it has never been talked about, so what happened is just like people trying to sweep it under the rug, and because it's a very sensitive thing to talk about. So we actually have to work when we're doing the museum revitalization, well, the plan, we have to work around those contexts. And this is what I always remind, for example, if we have a project, that we cannot just look at the project from a perspective of the project itself, but we have to understand where the project where the project stands and how it connected to the other ecosystem and the context of where they are. So it was very challenging because then we have to go to each and every sort of like people who play a role in Sampit and trying to find a way to figure out on how to bring them together. Because at one point we need to talk about the post-conflict discussion, but then at the same time, nobody wants to bring that up again. So we set up this workshop where in the beginning, we actually put the government and the community at the two separate days, so two separate workshops. One with the government, what we do is we are trying to sort of like create this, like peeling their layer. Because their first layer would be them as the government officials, right? And then after that, them as government officials who are working in the city. And then after that, them as people, the citizen of Sampit, who are working for the city, and the last one is them as just like the people of Sampit. So then we have to peel those layers, and the same thing we do also with the community, and only after those layers are done, then we bring them together. This is actually to avoid, because like if you put community together with the government, what happens is just like people are just complaining, and then the government will feel like they're being attacked. So we're being very careful with that. So that's one of the challenges that we have when working with the government in Indonesia. The other one, now it's the story from Poso. So Poso is there in the middle of the K. In year 2000, there was a religious conflict here, 500 casualties, more than 500 casualties as well. So this is a story of a friend of mine. Her name is Lian Gogali. So what Lian is doing, instead of, at that time, people are also taking refuge. So you have the Christian village and you have the Muslim village. And it's still a very sensitive, a very sensitive issue for them. So what Lian was doing, she slowly started, she started a women's school, but didn't really call it a women's school in the beginning. So what she did is like she started with a cooking community. So she invited these mothers to cook together and to swap food. And this allows to sort of like avoid the tension and then allow them to talk again to each other, because it's just about food. They're talking about food, but their family, about how to cook something. So slowly they start talking. And then when they started talking, so she did it like for quite a while. And then after they started talking, and then they start talking about like what's important for their family. And then from there, slowly they come up with these stories. The stories are almost the same because they're all victims. So then they share that similarity of being victim. It allows them to see differently from the beginning, where they're like, both are having this what is curiga? So suspicion, because it's from the other party. And that cooking sessions turn into, so they create what they call like the Earth Festival. So they invited people from different villages to celebrate their local food. So people are coming from villages even 20 kilometers away, walking, bringing the seeds and their harvest, their crops. So every year they have that festival, and then people are like basically swapping seeds. So that's where the conversation started. So, because some of the people like, oh, you still have that seed because it has been gone from my village for a long time. So then they swap that, and then again it started the conversation, and it allows them not to talk about the conflict, but that they know that they're facing their fellow from different village who at some point of time they were like conflicting with each other. This also allows a space to give voices for these people, because they're the one who arrange all of this, and it's led again by women. So they're the ones who are like leading the whole thing, creating the whole festival. The next one is Sumba. So Sumba has a more, it's not so gloomy. Sumba is over here. It's a 45 minutes flight from Bali. But Sumba and the province is known to be the poorest provinces in Indonesia. They have a lot of stunting problem, they have a lot of malaria, and some of the area are savanna, so it's very hard to plant crops. But in Sumba, you can still find like the local religion and also local villages like this. It's incredible the amount of knowledge that they have, but yet because there are so many influence from outside, it seems like for the younger people, they don't have enough time to sit and to actually think about their situation of the village, and that they actually already have a lot of solutions for their own problems. If you go to Sumba, a lot of these communities, they still live together, so it's like 3 generations together. But because of the influence of internet, of information, it seems like there is a gap between the young people and then the older ones, the older generations. So what happened is a lot of them, the young people tend to go out of Sumba, and the older one are there to keep the village alive, basically to keep the traditions alive. And the other thing that is happening also, because the young people feel like they are tied by traditions, this is really common in Indonesia. And the other problem that they're facing is the cultural debt. The cultural debt is when you have a wedding or when you have death in the family, then you have to hold this like a traditional party, and then you have to buy like 100 pigs to feed the whole village. You don't have the money most of the time, so then you loan money from the rich people, and then like this debt could stay in the family for like 100 years even. So we are working, so me and my friend who's the village head in one of the villages in Sumba, we are trying to do research on the cultural debt and how it actually, if there is a way for the young people to avoid it, and if there is a way to negotiate with the elderly to show them that that this needs to stop, this cycle needs to stop, because then you're giving this younger generation a problem that is not their fault. Of course, it's not easy with any other traditional culture, but that is something that they've been talking about. So I'm really excited to support them with that, because I'm a researcher, so the only thing I can do is doing research. Yeah, so those are the stories, and I think what I'm trying to say is like every time we enter like a new area, it's very important to see the context, because it's like, for me coming from Jakarta, it feels like I have a one size fits all because I do a lot of workshop, I know a lot of methodology and stuff like that. But every time I go to these places, it's always the other way around. It's always like me learning something from them and then just like working with them to see what they actually already have, and then working with them to find their own solutions instead of me coming up with solutions because I do not have the solutions. So yeah, so those are my my stories. If you want to know more about Indonesia, you can ask me. If you want to know where to go in Bali, you can ask Premi. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ellen. So that is another wonderful story. I have to stand here so like the camera can see me. Hello. So that is actually wonderful, and I would just like to share many of my thoughts. What I learned from that, when working with community to engage people, is actually not coming by understanding how and what we can do, but it's actually understanding the people that we are going to work with. So I think that's very wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Ellen. And let's welcome our last panelist for this session, Selina.
Selamat malam. Greetings from the dark. Do we have any Filipinos or Canadians here? And I'm representing. Okay. Oh, you are? Ah, okay. Peeps. Okay, so I'm really glad it was an excellent segue from your presentation as well, and I'm very excited to share our program with you. This is my life's work. I grew up in Jakarta, Manila, and then Toronto. So this is really from working across all the sectors. Circling back to the makerspace, I was a director for Toronto Maker Fair actually before I moved back to serve my country during the Typhoon Haiyan response. And really, the program tries to address, well, like answers two different questions. And that is, how do we serve the long-term well-being of our communities? And at the same time, how do we do our best work? So it's really trying to address who gets to create knowledge, because all these decisions are made based on data and research and these narrow windows of time. But from working in this space for the last 14 years, aside from my private sector space and working in politics, the fundamental five barriers that we're seeing to addressing first the Millennium Development Goals, and then now the Sustainable Development Goals, and then the pandemic, where we're using essentially the same language of Build Back Better and resilience, et cetera. But we're seeing a lot of the same systems still in place. So for one, the simple act of research and data collection is often very short term. There's so many workshops, there's so many short-term initiatives, and they're usually performed or completed by outsiders to that community. So they'll be from the urban areas or even be foreigners to that area. And it doesn't necessarily reflect the local knowledge nor the complex colonial histories of our communities. And secondly, bringing in people from the outside is very expensive. Consultant fees are expensive, the hardware, the software is expensive, the carbon footprint, hotels, food, all those things add up, where a majority of the budget is actually allocated to outside the community. Third is that there's a lack of local participation. So who gets to participate and have a voice in these public and private sector discussions, and especially the voices of women. So I had actually created the first gender gap, the first gender gap mapping study for World Bank, which really quantified and qualified the infrastructure and service gaps and the well-being between men and women in across 6 conflict areas in the province of Mindanao in the Philippines. So while women, I mean, we all know this, in fact, but it's not necessarily represented in our programs and investments, is that women do majority of the household work. In many communities, they're actually bringing in majority, if not the only income, and yet they have the least access to everything essential that you would need to succeed in life. And so women definitely, to have a successful pandemic recovery, we need their very unique infrastructure needs represented. They have to be at the center, they have to be at the forefront for all these initiatives, since they do so much and contribute so much. Fourth is the lack of livable wages. So we all have a story of migration, having to move to a congested urban area, being separated from our families. As Filipinos, as Indonesians, we have all suffered through this existence. And it's not a good way for families to grow up, not a way for kids to get to know their family members. And everybody, it would be nice to have opportunities at home, like you said, where you could continue to live and work at home if there were better opportunities for you there. And lastly is climate change. It's politicized, it's prohibitively expensive, it's often military that's dealing with a lot of this data. So how do we deal with the climate crises if there are so many barriers to being able to access accurate and affordable disaster and climate change data? So that's Open Knowledge Kit. So that's the only busy slide that we'll get. Essentially, we teach these to mostly non-technical and only local women. So I don't initiate a program until I've identified who all the progressive leaders are across government, business, nonprofit, university, and the local community. So that takes the longest time because I have to vet who's really doing good work for the community. And then I bring them all together if I can. Politically, sometimes we can't. and they all learn together. So everything we teach is free and open source. Most of it works without internet access, and it can be taught. The shortest training is 20 minutes remotely. We've actually been teaching our remote mapping techniques for over a decade. And the longest training is 4 days. We actually just finished our African and Indonesian training here in Bali just a few weeks ago. And so what we're trying to produce, as you see here, is not just doing a local data-based model, but we're actually trying to produce and able to produce faster, more accurate, verifiable data. And the goal is to have continuous and consistent methodologies every week, every month, year-round by the same local people rather than the scattered approach that we have, and then they leave and take all the knowledge and data, and good luck with the PDFs or, if you're lucky, JPEGs. And most of all the savings that we're able to make by not flying in expensive consultants, using expensive hardware and software, travel, carbon footprint, et cetera, we transfer all those savings down to local wages. So we're able to pay 2 up to 17 times higher local wages, train very quickly to really provide life-saving employment, especially now during the pandemic. You'll get your tech as well. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So a lot of our work is in 3D reconstruction. Again, this is all free and open source. And 3D reconstruction is so useful because you can actually extract spatial data. We know there have been a lot of floods here. There's floods everywhere in the world right now. But being able to quickly pass a drone and then extract measurements to know where there's the highest risk, highest damage areas is extremely valuable if you're saving lives and trying to fast track and prioritize repairs. But I'll just show a few of the tools. So Open Data Kit, you can download this. Many of you probably use this already on any app store. So you can train anybody how to use this and set this up in about 45 minutes. This works without internet access. So you can collect any kind of survey data, so interviews, survey questions, photos, and video. During the pandemic, I've been training local non-technical women. So the Johanna is actually from an active conflict area in the Philippines. I trained her for 20 minutes using Facebook Messenger because they don't have internet access in her community, using a $150 smartphone. And what you'll see next is how she actually takes the photos. So she's just doing 360-degree photos in a clock-like fashion in 3 different angles, and then she takes a couple more steps, and then our software creates the 3D reconstruction where you're able to extract the spatial data. And this is where we pray to the internet gods. Whoa. Pray harder, guys. Whoa. Well, maybe you can imagine it. Okay, there. So this is her very first try doing the 3D reconstruction. And so what this allows you to do is for the gender gap mapping, we can actually extract the data to find out where the largest potholes are in her village. As she walks through her area, that spatial data of distance, of how long it takes a woman to walk to essential services. And you can do conservation surveys as well, species of plants, etc. So everything you see here is spatial data, length, height, width, volume, etc. You can take those types of measurements. So for this, she's earning more than double the daily wage for about 3 hours of work. And so anybody can learn how to do this and train very quickly. Actually, last week in Karangasem, I'll explain more about the site here in Bali. I trained an illiterate woman how to do these data collection photos. And, okay, so this is in Karangasem, right here. It's about an hour and a half from Bali. And I selected the site because in beautiful Bali, Karangasem continues to be the poorest regency. And it used to be the seat of power in Bali before colonization. Stunningly beautiful, very high economic potential, but also very high disaster risk across all the risks. Every disaster, they're very high risk. And so what this allows you to do, the program is actually both. So it's humanitarian and also rapid economic development. This is the Talaga Waja River in Sidaman. So the local disaster agency showed us this river. It's very high flood risk. So this is taken using a DJI Mavic. So all our technology is using the cheapest drones available. And we've been able to train Indigenous youth leaders how to do this work in 2 days. And we're also able to, it's gonna flip over to show the topography as well, which is so key in this area because it's such a high flash flood and high landslide risk area. And one of the top land degradation sites in Indonesia. So that same technology that I showed you previously produces what you're looking at here, digital elevation and digital surface maps, which is what you need to produce for disaster risk and climate change modeling, which is the 5, 10, up to 1,000 year risks of which areas are going to be at risk. And so this is about 70%. We're actually finding that we can go lower than that, than traditional methodologies, which usually require a pilot, the gasoline to fly the plane out and fly the plane back, a military plane, a very expensive camera. And this can be done with 95% accuracy just using a basic drone. Now this for the tourism and creative industries, we don't have yet in many countries, including Indonesia, what they call a film location Bible. But you could see how this application works for construction. So because you're looking at spatial data, you do have a 3D model of, this is Besaki Temple. This is the most sacred site in Bali. This is at the foot of Mount Agung volcano, and it's a 23 temple complex. So if you get a chance to visit, I highly recommend it. But you can extract spatial data here. So if you're trying to see if this area might be a good location for your film shoot or monitor construction, you can do this remotely without having to send a team or an expensive team to monitor this. And again, we teach all of this to the local community. So this is creating employment. We're also teaching this, the Raspberry Shake. It's kind of dual purpose because it's for earthquake early warning, but it's also for security. So you can track footsteps, illegal logging, the vibrations from 16-wheel trucks, for example, and chainsaws. So it's very discreet as well when there are security concerns. How many people here know OpenStreetMap? Great. So we teach this in 2 days. The youngest we've taught is 6 years old, and the oldest is 60 plus, which was a frightened government worker. And so we're able to teach all this stuff because essentially you're just tracing satellite imagery. And we also tap into, which looks like that, and you're able to quickly extract data. So where are all the unpaved roads so we can pave those roads? Where are all the rivers, et cetera. You can run those reports very quickly, and there are 6 different layers of free satellite imagery. We also provide free access through the U.S. State Department of high resolution, 30 centimeter satellite resolution, free to the communities. And this allows for really rapid mapping in areas. We relied on a network of about 7 million mappers worldwide to fast track some efforts. This is our Karangasem mapping task. So we taught only locals how to do this task. And you can see all the edits. How many did they do for this one? Okay, in 30 days. Okay, so they did like about 6,000 edits, and every edit is tracked just like Wikipedia. And we teach them QGIS as well. So this is day 2 of the workshop on how to analyze big data sets. Again, free and open source. So we use MapSwipe, again, free. You can start helping tap away at major emergencies and disasters all around the world. Because the local disaster agency didn't have a drone, we employed the global network that we rely on to then look at image. So it'll ask you, do you see earthquake damage? And then you can tap like traffic colors. So yes, no, maybe with the corresponding colors. And they finished this we made this a low priority task. So in 30 days, they were able to finish an area of about 600 square kilometers. And we open a Youth Mapper chapter everywhere we map. So there's 300 Youth Mapper chapters and growing all over the world. It's free to set up a chapter. And it's a great network to be a part of because then you have access to grants, loans, fellowships, equipment, etc. And it's a great experience for the kids because you don't have to change the curriculum. You can teach the current curriculum and then have them apply mapping skills to that. And they have a great time because they're not sitting in a boring classroom. We opened the first Bali chapter actually with Uda University here just in June. And yeah, highly recommend that you set up your own chapter. and join the network. You only need to help map a task once a year. And also the starting salary for mappers is about $50,000. And Indonesia already has a lot of mappers because of GIS, but we can quickly convert them into all these amazing critical thinking and transferable skills that at the highest growth rates actually for mapping and data science. While it's higher than average industry rates everywhere else, in Asia Pacific, it's actually 25 to 35% compared to about 9 to 11% elsewhere in the world. And you can work from home. So you don't have to be separated from your families. You earn a really good income. We've already then developed the local resources. So in any emergency for urban planning, public and private sector investment, your skills are there and you're not having to rely on an outside consultant. So being able to also shift how the donors work together. So I was able to convince World Bank and DFAT to actually fund 4 simultaneous studies. So this is how we work, is that to be, again, respectful to the long-term well-being of the local community. Everybody's exhausted of having this revolving door of workshops and outsiders, and everything sounds old that's new again. And so being able to collect massive amounts of data by hiring the local community then provides more accurate data sets as well, because they care about the data sets. They're never usually asked, so the data is more accurate. And again, we can validate pretty much all the data that we're collecting. And I led the study, led a team of about 200 people across 6 provinces in the conflict area in the Philippines. These are the 4 simultaneous studies that we conducted. And this is a model that we're moving forward with now, is coordinating multiple donors together. We're all, struggling for funds right now. Local communities, economies are decimated. So if we can work better together and have better quality data and representative data, that's the model that we're moving towards. I'll skip that. I'll just whiz through these. So this is the multi-criteria that we work with, different weighted criteria. For example, for road infrastructure, there's proximity to agriculture areas, the cost, terrain, disaster risk. It looks horrendous in Mindanao. And then when you apply all those weights, this is how you can prioritize criteria. So this is how we're prioritizing infrastructure and investments for women, for MSMEs, for creative industries, etc. And likewise, being able to coordinate across the funders and have them work together to identify who's doing what, where, when, what are you doing, so to reduce the gaps and overlaps. And again, the stress that communities are placed under when they're forced to sit through yet another workshop because they need the money. This is an example of our super low-tech way to innovate what is usually a very expensive technical traffic speed and volume survey. So usually you're using a radar speed gun, it's about $500. But for this one, this is actually our highest paying job. And all of your countries, I can pretty widely say here, are part of this international road assessment program. So all this funding is already downloaded to your country via World Bank or via Asian Development Bank and African Development Bank as well. And so instead, what you're seeing here is just asking someone to bring a smartphone to a location. And I ask them, do you have 4 soft drink, 1 liter soft drink bottles or 4 plastic chairs? And the answer is usually yes. I say, go to this location and call me tomorrow. And then I walk them through the setup. So what you see here is we're measuring velocity. So when a pedestrian or a car hits this point, that's 1 timestamp. And as they exit the screen, they hit this timestamp, and that's how you calculate velocity. And so all those savings produces $100 for 1 hour of work to someone that desperately needs it. It's safe with it's outside. So we were doing this during the pandemic. And I also buy them a month of travel, medical, and liability insurance because it's quite affordable. So piecing together these road safety assessments are done every 100 meters. So that's a job for someone that pays really well every 100 meters all over our countries, to then be able to provide the road infrastructure that we need, because what we know is usually at the local level, not at the federal level, not at the provincial level, but they lack the skills at the local level, how to actually have these roads to be able to revitalize their economies. I work with the Indigenous and Community Conserved Areas Consortium as well. So this whole kit is being used to help empower local communities, because there's the circling of vulture-like software and hardware consultants. So we're very pleased to be working together with several communities around the world. We're currently working in Africa, Asia Pacific, and Indigenous Canada. And so that's kind of all the techie part. This is the Rapid Economic Regeneration Program. So this is what we did in Karangasem, where we look at working with ethnobotanists and reviving heirloom and heritage species that are high value. There's emojis on the bottom, I just noticed that. And then we connect them to premium and ethical markets locally and abroad. The same thing for creative industry. So during the pandemic, a lot of the Indigenous weavers that we work with were selling masks for $2. So we connected them to a Canadian retailer that was selling them for $25. And this is our hospitality and tourism program. So once things work through, it's being able to promote more cultural tourism. So smaller scale, but higher value. So targeting people that are actually interested in the local culture versus just a quick Instagram photo and then they take off. So this is the program that we actually presented at one of the G20 meetings in Sidamen. Again, this is in Karangasem. So it was a bit challenging, even though we worked with some of the top hotels and brands that are based in that area. But with 20 social media posts and trying to explain how to promote a farmer's market in an area that's an hour and a half away from an urban town was a challenge, but we were able to actually, or they were able actually to earn $800 or 12 million rupiah in a farmer's market for one day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So this whole program that I showed you can be conducted in 3 months. So we can rapidly provide lots of employment, lots of data, and can be converted from any tendered contract, any project that's currently existing can be converted into this methodology. And, okay. So this is the Indonesia, Africa. So this is our CGIR program that's scaling across Indonesia and Africa for the next 3 years. This is Desi. She's the Indigenous youth leader. She's Dayak. And we taught her how to fly the drones and do all the data processing, everything that you've seen in the program in 5 days. And so, yeah, that's the whole program. We're, as I mentioned, scaling across Asia Pacific and Africa over the next 3 years. And we hope that you can join this journey with us. We have found that the solutions are quite easy. They're in our midst. They're in our fingertips. And using free and open source software is finally being able to allow communities to have their own data sovereignty and to have stewardship over the long-term well-being of their communities. And it also allows us to do our best work by being able to make more informed decisions about the communities that we live and work in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Selena. So those are four amazing panelists for this community panel on people's engagement in shaping their own future. I think we still have. Do we still have time to do question and answer, Q&A? Who has some questions? All right. I think let's go back to wrap it up as well from the four presentations. Is that people's engagement? It is indeed important for them to be able to shape their own future. I think we are all humans here. We are all people as well. So it is very important to be able to be engaged to shape our own future. But then in the means of enabling us, ensuring that we are striving towards meeting the objective of what will be benefiting for our community, what will be impactful for our community, it is also, there's a strong need that the community that we are engaging, that the people that we are engaging are also fully wants to be involved in what we are doing. And so it will be able to enable us to utilize their abilities, like what Selena has just been presenting, is it enables us to also utilize their own skills, their own knowledge, to be made into an effort that will be supporting the objective of what we are doing together to be impactful for the community. And so we will see many positive actions by the people, and this will also involve in the things that from all the panelists that they have shared today. It involves the ownership and responsibility of solving problems within the communities, right? It also involves the active action of wanting to seek for opportunities that will enhance their competencies, their knowledge, their experience, and then from there they'll be able to share that within amongst them, right? And then there'll be a focus as well from this community to be able to create values for each other and add values for each other. So this is something that is actually really, really important for us, especially being in the Bali Fab Fest. I've seen the Fab Labbers, the Fab Lab communities from all over the world, the makers, as well as also inviting so many other type of people into the space and welcoming the shared knowledge with each other. So maybe from this standpoint or point of view, who has some probably questions or maybe something to discuss or comment on each of the panelists that have presented today? Maybe one or two? Oh, before you ask, then I'll probably ask some questions to at least to four of you who are here. How, because there are different, you do and approach the community, you do your work and approach communities from different angles and different point of view, that becomes as well something that works for you and also works for the community. So what do you think is the first step that you need to take when you're engaging a community and would like for people to then be interested and would like to work together with you to achieve a common goal or something that will be benefiting for both you and also the community that you are engaging? Yeah, so maybe we just sit here and then let's respond. All right, so the question has been asked. Who wants to go first? So the other way around, Sally would like to answer first. That is also okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, go for it.
I do a lot of listening. Usually, it's quite apparent when you walk into a community that the roads are crap, the internet's bad, there's no clean water. But it's just sitting with them and having a conversation and asking them. What we typically do, actually, when I don't actually show up and do a meeting with everybody until I've met all those progressive leaders across the sectors. But what I do is we collect all the public and private sector maps that we can find, and then use that as a conversation tool and say, how does this reflect the priorities in your community? How does this reflect what's important to you? And usually the common answer is, that's really old, that's not true, and it's missing a bunch of stuff. And then it helps them. And we actually, a unique thing, since we're talking about gender, is I usually actually separate the men and women, because we get very different results when we do that. And it's 1,000 times better when we do it that way, because women represent so much of their contributions to the economy and to society, and so they talk nonstop and always produce so much more results by doing that. And we actually have them draw maps. So we have a current map, and then we have them use crayons and Post-its and Legos and all different kinds of tools to represent what they need in their community. And usually we'll ask for one task, and the women will always show 15 tasks and say, I know this is for floods, but in my children's school, because they're never asked. So we just let them do a lot of the talking, and we do a lot of the listening.
All right, that's asking the right questions and do a lot of listening.
What was the question again, Primi?
So what do you what is the first thing that you do if you want to invite people to engage?
Okay, invite people to engage. I don't normally do things to invite people to engage. what I myself do is actually I'm trying to understand the complexities of things, because I think for every problem there is a complexity to it. We tend to, like always see a problem and think, oh, we've done it before, we can do it this way, but actually it's not true. At least that's what I found in my experience. So when by realizing this, and that's the first one. The second one is I'm trying to peel the layers. So the layers of the things that I'm facing. So like the revitalization of the Wood Museum project that we trying to do in Sampit, it's just so complex because Sampit is not a city, it's not an administrative city, but it's a part of the bigger municipality. But people don't know the municipality because Sampit is more popular. That's when we talk about the city branding, and then we talk about the government needs to brand the city. Second, if we want to make Sampit as the new face of the museum to be the new face of Sampit, what does it represent? Who it represents? Because Sampit is also like like every other cities that was developed during the colonial time with the industry. It becomes a multicultural city. It becomes like its own small cosmopolitan. So who it represents? Do we represent the traditional people who are there? But in reality, it's only like 20% of the traditional tribe who are there who lives in the city? Or do we represent this diversity? And the other thing is, what are we going to do with the sensitive issues? So what are the sensitive issues? Because when we're talking about the conflict in Sampit in particular, you have these two tribes that are still living side by side, and it's a ticking time bomb. So for example, like I said, there are 5 generations, right? And then the generation that are now who are teenagers, they don't know anything about it because they are born after the conflict happened. And because it's not something that is openly talked about, they only hear, sometimes they don't know because the parents doesn't want to talk about it. So what happened is, if there is a fight, this is just like, if there is a fight between 2 teenagers, let's just say like, it's a motorcycle gang, yeah, who's the coolest. And if it happens that the one is coming from the Dayak tribe and the other one is coming from Madura, it could easily become a new conflict. It could easily become an ethnic conflict because that's how sensitive it is, and that's how it was never talked about openly. So then they also don't know how to respond to it. And then it almost happened like several times, but because the people who are in their 50s at that time, this is important, the age, I find, the generations, they're in their 50s at that time, they're the one who are involved in the peace reconciliation. They're now in their 70s and they started dying, right, one by one. But they're the one who holds the history, so they're the one who knows how dangerous it is if if there is like a small conflict, if it's not being suppressed, then it will easily become exploded. But they will they're dying one by one, so then this memory will go with them. So that's also another complexities that we're trying to, so that's why when we designed that museum, it's not happening yet, just a disclaimer, because there's a political conflict, so then the project was postponed. But during the designing of the museum, what we're thinking is, how can we collect these memories and how can we use this museum to slowly discuss about what happened.
All right.
So then people just coming, just one more thing.
Yeah.
No, just because this is important, just to make sure that people, at the end of the day, we are all the same people who want, who want maybe the same thing. We want peace. We want peace. So then that's why it's very important to peel that layer that, okay, first and foremost, okay, you're representing your government, you're representing your tribe, but you peel that layer until you become a citizen of that city. And at the end of the day, you're just people. But it takes, like, when we're designing the workshop, it just takes a lot of, like squeezing our brains off, reading all this history about the conflict, reading who's like, who are the people who are still having the role, because a lot of them are also the perpetrators. So then, but then we come up like, empathy is actually the main thing. At the end of the day, we're all people. We all want to live in peace. So that's
Yeah.
So that's how complex everything is.
That's very important. If I may wrap that up, it's actually about being patient with the process that we are going through, trying to make people, and not really make people, to try to ignite a curiosity for them to be able to engage with us in the project that we are doing or anything that we are doing. There's a lot of things that needs to be
Can I just
opened
sorry
up.
because I'm afraid being patient it would simplify the things. Like, because for a project like this, it's really the humility to understand the complexity of things.
Wow,
So I think
that's
yeah,
really
because it's a
profound.
different thing.
Thank you for that. It's the humility to repeat that again, please. It's the humility to understand the complexity of things. That is very, very profound. Thank you for that. All right.
So I think in the way that I've kind of, I mean, that's my personal kind of take on this question is that when you want to engage with the community, I think action is also key. So when you act and when the community and people see you acting, they kind of like really get inspired and join. So I feel that
It's
it's
a
a show,
show.
yeah.
It's a show and tell.
show
not
and
tell.
not tell,
something.
not
Yeah.
preach, but
Yeah.
to do. So so I think action is key. And I think one of the other things that I was thinking about when you asked this question was, I had seen this video. I don't know if anyone's seen this. There's a video about how do you build a movement, and in the video it shows this. This guy doing this crazy thing and he's dancing and he's not really worried about people watching him. So he's independently kind of like leading the pack and kind of just doing his thing, and then one more person joins in and starts doing the same crazy dance, and then the whole crowd joins in. So it's about kind of like really taking initiative and showing people that you can act because you have the power to act and solve. And when people see that, I think that really encourages them to engage.
That is another powerful one. We're learning a lot today.
I think they already answered almost all the question, and then I think I will just add some maybe what through my experience actually what I did is more rock and roll actually rather than have any method, because it's always like different. So 80% maybe is just rock and roll and 20% is just build their curiosity. Usually we are in the project and they come to lab and then they said like, what can I help? And I said like, I don't need any help, I just need what you can do. And then so what can I do? And then that's the question actually, what can you do? So I think it's just being open is one of the thing that we always do, but open mean is to give more rather than to take more. So
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. Anyone has any questions?
Hello, my name is Jean-Luc. I'm
Happy
president-
birthday, Jean-Luc.
Hi. Oh, thank you. I'm president at the North American Indian Center of Boston. So not quite Toronto, Canada, but probably enough of a neighbor for you, Selena. I wanted to ask about your experiences with decolonization within the maker movement, and perhaps like experiences in terms of like navigating situations in which people within our overall maker movement, they're very much focused on global innovation and technology. They're still very much perpetuating colonial practices. So what are your experiences within that regard?
That's a great question. And something actually being in the humanitarian mapping sector and having worked across, very male-dominated, Western-dominated advertising politics for seasons, I was very surprised that working in the humanitarian mapping sector, I experienced the most racism and misogyny and abuse from the highest levels of government to just strangers on the internet. And it's finally the Black Lives Matter movement really helped with this discussion. But it's just the beginning. We're still seeing not the pace of change that we want to see. For one specific to my sector, there is actually a peer-reviewed and published study on conflict in the mapping community because it's this secret that everybody's kind of avoiding, and a lot of people leave the sector. A lot of women leave the sector because of that. And oftentimes it's a lot of Western male mappers that just shit on other people, and they seem to feel like, you know, they can decide what knowledge is, and even though you're from the local community, your knowledge doesn't matter as much as mine does. And that's what we've been doing. So for one, I've been working exclusively with BIPOC people in our community, and very, very rare exceptions if there's a missing piece. But even in the workshops that we're doing, we acknowledge that. And what I've been finding during the pandemic, working with First Nations in Canada and even here and in East Africa, is before, because I'm always an outsider to the very rural communities that we work with, and working with Indigenous communities, usually it's a few days to warm up before they're more open. But during the pandemic, it just blew everything open, and they're right on day one, they're saying, we're sick of foreigners coming here. They're very vocal about it. So I'm glad we can fast track those conversations. But for one, we have an exclusively BIPOC team now, and that's how we're operating in each of the communities, is we take the time to actually hire local people. And even before we do any kind of training or engagement, I will actually, if there's no one in that community with a particular skill set that we're looking for, we actually pre-train someone so that a comfortable, trusted member from that community can then lead the workshop. Code of conducts have made a great difference in what we're doing, because we've actually ejected people from bad behavior. I guess one of the bonuses of the mapping sector as well is when you're using OpenStreetMap, all the edits are visible. So it's quite clear when someone with a foreign sounding name or a woman sounding username gets a lot of harassment. So that's what we're dealing with more directly now, because it's quite visible. But on the other hand of things, if at the highest levels of government, they're emboldened to put things in writing and in text, then it shows you, they're acting in a place of impunity. And coming from a place where we really just have to create our own systems versus waiting for Western acknowledgement or recognition or having that logo, and just deciding for ourselves. And I think the pandemic was the perfect opportunity to have these very frank conversations, because all the money is being held up by Western organizations. So being able to make those quite large changes within the institutions, because that's our taxpayer money. So we should have a right in how it's actually being dispersed, and it shouldn't be always this much for the local community and this much for the foreign consultant, when we know, because of job opportunities, that very talented people with very high expertise have to move away, but they exist. So it's just taking the time to find them, to bring them back to the community and have them come home. And it's just BIPOC to BIPOC. And actually that was our first workshop that we just had 4 weeks ago. And I mean, we get people crying at pretty much every workshop because of the way that we just respect people and implement it in a different way. But just having that calm and very welcoming environment that was very unique from the technical people and the non-technical people, and bringing together two very different worlds but very similar colonial experience was much more effective. And they reflected that in their learning as well, where they said, even the engineer said, this is the first time I've not been afraid or not felt embarrassed or stupid in a workshop, where I feel like I can just be myself. So it's just the very beginning. And we're very excited to be able to have, the funding, and we're still able to announce more funding to be able to then make this a more powerful movement and not just these separate entities. And so hopefully, we're circling back to Canada again, because the pandemic has had, and also reparations and all those things have been such powerful experiences that have kind of held back some of our initiatives in Canada. But hopefully by the first quarter of next year, we can come back there and hopefully work with your group as well because of the ICCAs as well. So.
All right. Thank you so much for that. We are limited only by time, but I believe even after this, there's a social event that is happening right in this space here anyway. So anyone who wants to connect with the four ladies, amazing women leaders here, on any questions, any further questions that you have, any more curiosity, and probably even looking to do projects together, please do so and connect with them. And I think for this session, I would like to thank all four of you ladies. Thank you so much for being our panelists today for the community panel. And have fun in the rest of the Bali Fab Fest 2022. All right. Thank you, everyone.